Joining us now to review some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is Arise News analyst Vimbai Muntiri Ekpenyong. Well, you are great, what now?
Definitely not a Malabite, but I will do my best to fill the big shoes that need to be filled just for now. Good morning, Ayo. Good morning, Dr. Abati. Thank you so much for having me back here again. Ayo, I don't know, Dr. Abati, I'm not sure if you agree. Ayo was giving people Valentine's Day inspiration yesterday, and they were complaining on social media saying, the year has not even ended, and Ayo is already making us pray and fast for Valentine's Day. Beautiful.
Thank
you.
We try to. Valentine's Day is every day.
It's every day.
For people who are in love.
Oh, you know, Dr. Abati is a romantic.
Yeah, I do know. I do know, and I absolutely love when he writes about his partner. Yeah. But let's get into the business of the day. Of course, we're here for the newspaper reviews, and of course our tradition here is to start with the newspaper of record, which is this day, which according to tradition as well, on Boxing Day takes a leave of absence. So we're wishing all of our colleagues at this day a wonderful Boxing Day, and we hope that they get the much needed rest that they deserve from all the year, all the work that they put in through the year. So let's kick off with Punch newspaper. Now, Punch is leading with a story about, well, the state of the economy. 13 states plan fresh 2.3 trillion borrowing. Of course, we all know that by now all the state budgets have been presented. They're all in, and the big number is looking at 2.3 trillion, and that's not even all the states. That's only 13 states. The NLC Secretary General Chris Onyeka has already commented on that, saying these loans do not repay themselves. So the NLC is already expressing concern at the amount of borrowing, especially domestic borrowing, that continues to happen from within the states. They're also lamenting the fact that workers are not being paid. Civil servants are not being paid. So what is happening with all the money that is being borrowed? Above the masthead is a story that Dr. Abati and Ayo have already looked at in detail, but there's no way we can just give it a back seat. It's a big conversation for us to continue having. While some parts of the country were enjoying the festivities, we know that Plateau State, unfortunately, acknowledged a very dark Christmas yesterday. Over 50 killed, soldiers injured in multiple Plateau attacks. That's above the masthead. To the left of that, Rivers State, of course, Boxing Day, and they've got their boxing gloves straight back on in Rivers State. PDP fumes as Fubara defends Tinubu over peace deal. So that's what the Punch is looking at. And just to round up what's happening above the masthead of the Punch newspaper, CBN investigator summons Lemo others over Union Bank deal. So this is not going anywhere. And the work that is being done by the special investigator, that's Jim Obazi, is going to continue to be on the front burner for a few days. But let's quickly move forward to the Nation newspaper, which is leading with that very same story. Probe into $500 million Union Bank acquisition widens. And then above the masthead, federal government extends 50% rebate to non-luxury bus passengers in Abuja. So it was a slightly more festive Christmas to those in Abuja who got to enjoy non-luxury bus travels. To the Daily Trust very quickly, where we are leading, of course, with tragedy. One of the most tragic things that can happen during a season like Christmas. 145 killed as bandits attack 23 Plateau villages. Now above that, I also want to take some time later to discuss this. Flight delays, cancellations worsen as NCAA pleads with passengers. Dr. Abati, I know you're both, you're travelers, you're very frequent travelers, especially within Nigeria. So I hope we can take a look at that, because if you remember, the Minister of Aviation had promised that starting from the 4th of January, they will start fining and naming and shaming all of those airlines that cause delays. So that's a conversation to be had. Now, at the very bottom, federal workers observe Christmas without December salaries. Unfortunate developments, especially when the economy is already biting so hard. Now, let's move over to the Daily Sun. Black Christmas. And of course, that's alluding to that horrific tragedy that we witnessed in Plateau State yesterday. Then the lead story, Kaigama opens up on Pope's same-sex couples blessing. All right, we'll quickly move on to the Blueprint newspaper, where the focus is on Rivers State. Stay away from fight you know nothing about. This is Wike, the Minister of the FCT, to the Rivers elders. We're not seeing any end to this saga, it seems. And now at the very top, just below the masthead, there's Kuka to Tinubu. You must not fail Nigerians. And that's a theme I want to take over to the Leadership newspaper as well, which is also leading above the masthead. Palliatives can't solve Nigeria's problem. All excerpts that have been taken from Bishop Kuka's address yesterday, from his Christmas Day address. A lot to unpack in that, especially just to take some quotes. He said, Nigeria's problems will not be resolved by palliatives, as the problems are deep and structural. He also says we have seen the faltering steps of policy decisions which have elicited a mixture of controversy, anxiety, and praise. This is to be expected. Then he also touched on blasphemy laws. So there was a lot that was touched on in that address, and hopefully we can discuss that later. And then just to round up what we've got from our local newspapers, Business Day. You know, I always like to end with good news. Business Day, refining outlook brightens on Dangote PH plants. Of course, we all know we're waiting with bated breath for Dangote to start churning out that much needed and hopefully well-priced fuel and petroleum products. Same goes with the PH plant that we know mechanized has been completed. We are now looking to hear what the detailed next steps, timelines and milestones will look like, so that we can it can be a supporting measure to not just Dangote refineries, but all the other state-owned refineries that we have been promised and assured will start churning out product to the nation as soon as yesterday, as soon as we need it. So that's what the front pages of the newspapers are looking like at the moment. And shall we start with ladies first? Ayo, I hand it over to you. Our first major story, of course, is states and the fresh borrowing.
Yeah, so in terms of, that's from the Punch newspaper this morning, states and borrowing, they've justified the reason for wanting to borrow. Unfortunately, what we're looking at is that a number of states are struggling to even repay loans that were borrowed in the past, and so analysts have wondered if this is a good idea in the first instance. The truth is that a number of states are not able to, are almost not able to run on their own, despite the FAC allocations. Whenever we have candidates coming on the show to interview them, we had the Edo State hopeful for the APC last week, and we often ask them as to how they plan to shore up IGR in their states, so as to lessen the pressure on whether they're borrowing or whether they're a dependence on FAC, and also how to even repay loans, because a number of these states, if not all 36, have existing loans to repay. And oftentimes they don't really have a clue as to how to attract foreign investment, be able to generate a revenue for their state, and so they depend largely on borrowing and more borrowing without a concrete plan as to how to pay back. So the challenge usually is not that states or even Nigeria as a nation is borrowing. It is our GDP the size of our GDP, and also the ability to pay back loans. Our debt servicing, it is not sustainable, and we are not being creative in terms of how to generate revenue to be able to pay back these loans. So these are some of the concerns. And then, of course, concerns by analysts also is that the previous loans that were obtained by these states, what did they do with them? Can they justify what it was used for? You cannot continue to borrow for revenue costs without, infrastructural development, capital projects. These are some of the criticisms of wanting to access fresh borrowing in this state. So again, I don't know if it will be down to the State House of Assembly to approve, but we'll see how that happens.
All right, Dr. Abati, so many huge stories today, I always love your insights. So I'm going to hand over to you. What are some of your insights, especially maybe on Bishop Kuka's address?
Well, Bishop Kuka's homily, it's about the crisis that we all face. He was talking about greatness. How can a country be great? And he benchmarked it with what is happening in the Middle East. The fact that in Bethlehem, in 2023, the birthplace of Jesus Christ, the manger, he said in one of his paragraphs, is in ruins because of the fact that people say they are looking for joy. They want to be happy. And he said, the message of Christmas is not even happiness, because happiness is ephemeral. The message of Christmas is joy, which is something that is longer lasting, which calls for reflection, which is more spiritual. And he used that, introductory paragraphs of his message to now reflect on the Nigerian condition. And the point he was making about the fact that we need concrete measures, interestingly, was the same point that had been made by the leader of the NLC president, Joe Ajaero, who made the point that, look, the government should go beyond promising palliatives, as the president did in his Christmas message, should look at concrete measures. And these concrete measures will have to do with all the areas that affect our lives, including security and other challenges that we face. So these are the issues. I understand that we don't have more time, but I would like to remind everyone that, by the way, because of production costs, the cover price of newspapers is going to go up from January 4. From Monday to Saturday, it will now be 400 naira, according to the Newspaper Proprietors Association of Nigeria. And on Sunday newspapers will be 500 naira. So if you still continue to review newspapers for us, you are going to buy at a higher cost. But the good news is that President Tinubu says he's going to work with the NPAN, Newspaper Proprietors Association, to see how, the newspaper industry, the publishing industry, can be assisted to deal with all these challenges of foreign exchange, instability of the naira, high production costs, because newspapers are important for purposes of literacy, education, information. After all, Jefferson said, if you were to have a government without newspapers or newspapers without government, he would choose the latter, because newspapers are very important. So you are on to a good thing.
Right? Thank you very much, Dr. Abadi. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.